Welcome, friend, to this peaceful journey through the mist-shrouded corridors of medieval France, where we'll trace the remarkable story of how a small noble family transformed into the founders of one of Europe's most enduring dynasties. Tonight, we'll walk alongside the Capetian kings as they built the kingdom that would become modern France, witnessing their triumphs and struggles in an age of stone castles and sacred oaths. Whether you're settling in for the night or simply seeking to slow the pace of your evening, I'm grateful you've chosen to join me on this soothing exploration of medieval history. The year is 987, and the great hall of Senlis echoes with the hushed conversations of France's most powerful nobles. Tapestries depicting hunting scenes hang from stone walls, their rich colours muted by flickering torchlight. The air carries the scent of burning oak and the lingering aroma of roasted meat from the evening feast. Archbishop Adalberon of Reims stands before the assembled lords, his weathered hands gripping an ornate staff topped with silver. The weight of decision hangs heavy in the smoky air. These nobles have gathered to choose a new king, but their choice will echo through centuries. The Carolingian dynasty, once mighty under Charlemagne, has withered like autumn leaves. The last Carolingian ruler lies cold in his tomb, leaving no direct heir. France stands at a crossroads, and the path these men choose will determine whether their fractured realm will find unity or dissolve into endless warfare. Hugh Capet sits quietly among the assembled nobles, his lean frame draped in a simple woolen cloak fastened with a bronze brooch. Unlike some of his more ostentatious peers, Hugh wears no golden circlets or jewelled daggers. His dark hair, streaked with early grey at 35, frames a face marked by thoughtful lines around intelligent brown eyes. He possesses lands stretching from Paris to Orléans, but his true wealth lies in something more precious than silver or fertile fields. Hugh Capet commands loyalty. The morning sun streams through narrow windows as the nobles debate. Some voices rise in heated argument, others whisper in shadowed alcoves. Hugh remains still, listening to the ebb and flow of political manoeuvring with the patience of a man who understands that power often comes to those who wait rather than those who grasp. His supporters move through the crowd like skilled craftsmen, weaving alliances with quiet words and meaningful glances. Archbishop Adalberon calls for order, his voice carrying the authority of both church and crown. The moment has arrived for decision. One by one, the great lords of France step forward to cast their votes. The Count of Anjou nods toward Hugh. The Duke of Normandy follows suit. Even potential rivals recognise that Hugh Capet offers something the fractured kingdom desperately needs: stability without tyranny, strength without oppression. When the final vote is counted, Hugh Capet has been chosen as King of the Franks. Yet this moment of triumph carries no grand celebrations or elaborate ceremonies. Hugh accepts the crown with solemn dignity, understanding that he has inherited not a prize, but a burden. The kingdom he now rules exists more in name than reality. Beyond his own domains around Paris, royal authority has withered to little more than a courteous fiction. The coronation takes place in the cathedral at Noyon on July 3rd, 987. Shafts of coloured light stream through stained glass windows, painting the stone floor in blues and reds. The ancient ritual unfolds with sacred precision as Hugh kneels before the altar. Holy oil, blessed by generations of saints, anoints his forehead. The crown of Charlemagne, heavy with gold and precious stones, settles upon his brow. Yet Hugh knows that true kingship will not flow from oil and metal, but from the painstaking work of building trust and demonstrating wisdom. The newly crowned king returns to Paris, where his castle sits on the Ile de la Cité like a stone ship anchored in the Seine. The royal residence is modest compared to the palaces his descendants will inhabit. Thick walls of grey limestone rise from the island's edge, punctuated by narrow windows that offer views of the river flowing past. Inside, rushes cover floors of packed earth, and braziers provide warmth against the autumn chill. This is not the Versailles of later centuries, but a working fortress where a king must prove himself through deed rather than ceremony. Hugh's daily routine begins before dawn, with prayers in the castle chapel. Kneeling on cold stone before a simple wooden cross, he seeks divine guidance for the challenges ahead. The chapel's walls bear no elaborate frescoes or golden decorations, only the weathered stones that have witnessed the prayers of countless rulers. Here, in the flickering light of beeswax candles, Hugh Capet begins each day by acknowledging the power greater than any earthly crown. After prayers, the king breaks his fast with bread, ale, and perhaps some preserved meat or cheese. His meals are hearty but simple, shared with his closest advisors around a wooden table scarred by years of use. These men discuss the day's business while morning light gradually illuminates the great hall. Reports arrive from across the kingdom, disputes between nobles, threats from neighbouring rulers, requests for royal arbitration in matters both great and small. Hugh listens to each report with careful attention, asking questions that reveal his understanding of the complex web of relationships that bind medieval society together. He knows that his authority rests not on fear or overwhelming force, but on his ability to serve as a wise mediator and fair judge. When the Count of Blois seeks royal support in a boundary dispute with his neighbour, Hugh must weigh not only the legal merits, but also the political implications of his decision. Every judgment creates allies or enemies, and a king with limited military power cannot afford to multiply his foes unnecessarily. The morning's business complete, Hugh often rides out to inspect his domains around Paris. His horse, a sturdy destrier, bred for endurance rather than show, carries him along muddy roads that wind through forests and fields. The countryside shows the scars of recent conflicts, with abandoned farmsteads and overgrown fields bearing witness to the violence that has plagued France in recent decades. Hugh surveys this landscape with the eye of a man who understands that royal authority means nothing if it cannot protect those who till the soil and tend the flocks. At a village outside Paris, Hugh dismounts to speak with the local priest and leading farmers. These conversations, conducted in the shadow of a modest stone church, reveal the real challenges facing the kingdom. Bandits terrorize travelers on the main roads. Local nobles settle disputes through private warfare rather than royal justice. Merchants fear to transport goods across territorial boundaries, where different lords impose their own taxes and regulations. The villagers speak respectfully to their king, but Hugh can see the wariness in their eyes. They have learned through bitter experience that the protection of distant rulers often proves as ephemeral as morning mist. Hugh's task is to transform this skepticism into trust, demonstrating through consistent action that royal authority can bring genuine benefits rather than mere ceremony and taxation. Returning to Paris as evening approaches, Hugh finds his castle transformed by the soft glow of torches and oil lamps. The great hall fills with the sounds of preparation for the evening meal. Servants arrange trestle tables while kitchen staff carry in platters of roasted fowl, fresh bread, and seasonal vegetables. The king's table sits on a raised platform, but Hugh makes a point of moving among his guests, listening to their concerns and sharing in their conversation. These evening gatherings serve multiple purposes in Hugh's careful strategy for building royal authority. Nobles, who might otherwise view the king as a distant figure, come to know him as a man of wisdom and fairness. Abbots and bishops share news from across the Christian world, keeping Hugh informed of developments that might affect his kingdom. Merchants and craftsmen provide insights into the economic currents that flow beneath political events. After the evening feast, Hugh retires to his private chambers, where maps and documents await his attention. By candlelight, he studies reports from his scattered allies and agents throughout France. Each piece of parchment represents another thread in the complex tapestry of medieval politics. A monastery requests royal confirmation of its ancient privileges. A count seeks permission to fortify his castle against Viking raids. A bishop complains of interference from secular nobles in church affairs. Hugh reviews each document carefully, dictating responses to his scribes in the careful Latin that serves as the language of official business. His responses reveal a mind that grasps both immediate practicalities and long-term consequences. He grants the monastery's request, but attaches conditions that strengthen royal oversight. He approves the count's fortification plans, while requiring regular reports on military activities. He supports the bishop's position, but suggests compromises that avoid unnecessary confrontation with powerful nobles. As midnight approaches, Hugh finally allows himself a few moments of quiet reflection. Standing at a narrow window that overlooks the Seine, he watches the dark waters flow past his island fortress. The weight of kingship settles around him like a heavy cloak, but Hugh Capet has accepted this burden willingly. He understands that he is not merely ruling a kingdom, but founding a dynasty that must endure long after his own bones have turned to dust. The challenges facing the first Capetian king are immense. His royal authority extends little beyond his own domains around Paris and Orléans. Powerful dukes and counts rule their territories as independent princes, acknowledging royal overlordship only when it suits their interests. The threat of Viking raids continues along the northern coasts, while to the east, the Holy Roman Emperor watches for any sign of weakness that might justify intervention in French affairs. Yet Hugh Capet possesses advantages that will prove crucial to his success. His family has served as kingmakers for generations, building networks of alliance and obligation that span the kingdom. Unlike previous rulers who relied primarily on military conquest, Hugh understands that lasting authority must be built on consent and mutual benefit. He seeks not to dominate France through force, but to unite it through patient diplomacy and consistent justice. The foundation Hugh lays during these early years of his reign will support a dynasty that endures for over 3 centuries, producing saints and scholars, crusaders and lawmakers who shape not only France, but all of medieval Europe. But on this quiet night in 987, as the first Capetian king prepares for sleep in his modest chamber above the Seine, the future remains unwritten, waiting to be shaped by choices yet unmade and challenges yet unforeseen. The winter of 988 brings bitter cold to the Ile de la Cité, and Hugh Capet wakes each morning to frost covering the narrow windows of his chamber. His breath forms small clouds in the frigid air as he rises from his bed of wool-stuffed mattresses and fur coverings. The stone walls seem to absorb warmth during the day, only to release it back to the darkness during the long nights. A servant enters quietly, carrying glowing coals in an iron brazier to chase away the worst of the chill. Hugh's morning ablutions are simple but thorough. Water from the Seine, heated over kitchen fires, fills a bronze basin where he washes his hands and face. His clothing reflects the practical needs of a medieval king rather than later notions of royal splendor. A linen undertunic, dyed a deep blue with precious woad, covers his lean frame. Over this goes a woolen tunic of forest green, its sleeves trimmed with bands of silk thread worked in geometric patterns. A leather belt, studded with bronze fittings, holds a simple eating knife and a small purse containing silver coins bearing his newly minted image. The king's breakfast remains modest, shared with his closest advisors in a chamber warmed by a crackling fire. Bread baked fresh that morning accompanies preserved meat and hard cheese, washed down with weak ale flavoured with herbs from the castle garden. While they eat, messengers arrive with reports that will shape the day's decisions. A dispute has erupted between 2 monasteries over fishing rights along the Marne River. Raiders, possibly Vikings, have been spotted along the Norman coast. The Duke of Aquitaine has failed to appear at court for the 3rd consecutive summons. Hugh listens to each report with the focused attention of a man who understands that small problems ignored often become large crises. His questions probe beneath surface details to uncover underlying tensions and opportunities. The monastic dispute may seem trivial, but both abbeys command significant wealth and influence. The Viking threat requires immediate military response, but Hugh lacks the resources for extended campaigns. The Duke of Aquitaine's absence signals a direct challenge to royal authority that cannot go unanswered. After breaking his fast, Hugh makes his way to the castle chapel for the morning service. The small stone chamber echoes with the voices of monks chanting the canonical hours, their Latin words rising like incense toward the vaulted ceiling. Hugh kneels on the hard floor, his crown set aside, becoming simply another penitent soul seeking divine guidance. The ritual provides not only spiritual comfort, but also political necessity, demonstrating his commitment to the church that legitimized his kingship. Following prayers, the king holds court in his great hall, where petitioners wait to present their cases. The hall fills with an extraordinary mixture of medieval society. Abbots in black robes stand beside knights in mail hauberks. Merchants wearing fine woolens mingle with farmers in simple homespun tunics. Each brings their concerns before the royal throne, a chair of carved oak that speaks more of sturdy craftsmanship than imperial grandeur. A widow from Meaux seeks justice against a lord who has seized her late husband's mill. Hugh listens carefully as she explains how the mill, granted to her family 3 generations ago, provides her only means of support. The accused lord claims the grant was invalid, made by a count who exceeded his authority. The case reveals the tangled web of medieval law, where ancient privileges clash with contemporary power struggles. Hugh's decision will affect not only this widow, but also the broader question of whether royal grants carry permanent authority or remain subject to later challenge. The king questions both parties closely, his legal training evident in the precision of his inquiries. Medieval justice relies heavily on precedent and witness testimony rather than written documentation. Hugh must weigh competing claims while considering their broader implications for royal authority. His eventual ruling favours the widow, based on the principle that royal grants once made cannot be arbitrarily revoked. The decision strengthens the concept of legal permanence while demonstrating that royal justice protects the weak as well as the powerful. The morning's judicial proceedings continue with a boundary dispute between 2 neighbouring lords. Their conflict has escalated from verbal arguments to armed skirmishes that threaten the peace of entire regions. Hugh recognises that behind their specific disagreement lies a larger question about the role of royal authority in resolving noble conflicts. Previous kings might have ignored such disputes, allowing them to fester into private wars. Hugh chooses a different approach, appointing a commission of neutral nobles to survey the disputed territory and render binding judgment. As noon approaches, Hugh retreats to his private chambers for a meal and consultation with his inner circle of advisors. These men represent the core of his administration, drawn from various backgrounds but united in their commitment to strengthening royal government. Among them sits Abbot Abbo of Fleury, whose scholarly reputation extends throughout Europe. His knowledge of canon law and theological principles proves invaluable in navigating the complex relationships between secular and ecclesiastical authority. Gerber of Aurillac, soon to become Pope Sylvester II, brings mathematical and astronomical learning acquired during his studies in Islamic Spain. His understanding of administrative techniques used by other rulers provides Hugh with models for reforming royal government. These afternoon discussions blend practical politics with intellectual exploration, as Hugh and his advisors work to create new approaches to the ancient challenges of medieval kingship. The conversation often turns to the fundamental question of royal legitimacy. Hugh's election by the nobles provides legal foundation for his rule, but lasting authority requires something deeper than mere consent. Medieval kingship draws its ultimate justification from divine sanction, the belief that God chooses earthly rulers to maintain order and justice. Hugh must demonstrate through his actions that he truly serves as God's agent on earth, worthy of the sacred trust placed in his hands. This theological dimension of kingship influences every aspect of Hugh's governance. His judicial decisions must reflect divine justice, not merely political expedience. His military actions must serve righteous purposes rather than personal ambition. His treatment of the church must balance respect for ecclesiastical independence with assertion of royal prerogatives. The balance requires constant attention, as any perceived failure in his sacred duties could undermine the religious foundation of his authority. The afternoon brings visits from foreign ambassadors and travelling scholars, who provide Hugh with information about developments beyond his borders. The Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, still young but already showing signs of the ambition that characterizes his dynasty, watches French affairs with keen interest. Any sign of weakness might invite intervention under the pretext of restoring legitimate authority. Hugh must project strength while avoiding provocations that could trigger unwanted conflicts. From England comes news of King Ethelred's struggles against renewed Viking invasions. The English king's difficulties serve as a reminder that the threats facing Hugh's kingdom extend beyond internal divisions. Viking fleets continue to probe European coasts, seeking opportunities for profitable raids. The success of these maritime warriors depends partly on their ability to exploit political fragmentation among their intended victims. Hugh's efforts to unite France serve defensive as well as administrative purposes. Evening finds Hugh reviewing correspondence with his scribes, men trained in the complex art of medieval diplomacy. Each letter must be crafted to achieve specific objectives while maintaining the elaborate courtesies that govern relations between rulers. A message to the Duke of Normandy requires firm language about his obligations as a royal vassal, but must avoid phrasing that could be interpreted as an ultimatum. Communication with the Pope demands expressions of filial devotion while carefully preserving royal rights in ecclesiastical matters. The king's writing chamber glows with the warm light of oil lamps as clerks prepare clean parchment and mix fresh ink. Hugh dictates slowly, choosing each word for its precise meaning and diplomatic implications. Medieval Latin provides a rich vocabulary for subtle distinctions, allowing skilled writers to convey multiple layers of meaning within seemingly simple statements. A request can simultaneously serve as a command. A suggestion can carry the force of a threat, and expressions of friendship can establish clear boundaries for acceptable behaviour. As night deepens over Paris, Hugh makes his final rounds through the castle, checking on guards and ensuring that all is secure for the night. The torches that line the corridors cast dancing shadows on stone walls, decorated with simple tapestries depicting hunting scenes and religious themes. These evening walks provide opportunities for informal conversations with soldiers, servants, and minor officials, whose loyalty forms the foundation of royal power. In the castle kitchen, Hugh pauses to speak with the head cook about provisions for the coming weeks. Medieval logistics require constant attention, as the transportation of food and supplies depends on weather, road conditions, and political relationships with local lords. The king must ensure that his household can maintain its hospitality toward visitors, while having sufficient reserves to weather unexpected crises. These practical concerns, unglamorous but essential, occupy much of a medieval ruler's attention. The castle chapel draws Hugh for final prayers before sleep. Kneeling before the altar, illuminated only by the eternal flame that burns in honour of Christ, the king offers thanks for the day's blessings and seeks guidance for tomorrow's challenges. The quiet moments of prayer provide respite from the constant demands of kingship, allowing Hugh to centre himself spiritually before facing another day of complex decisions and delicate negotiations. Retiring to his chamber, Hugh finds his bed warmed by heated stones wrapped in wool cloth. The simple comfort represents one of the few luxuries permitted to medieval royalty. As he settles beneath fur coverlets, the sounds of the castle settling for the night filter through thick walls. Guards call softly to each other from the battlements, nightbirds cry from the river, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls the hour. Yet sleep often proves elusive for the Capetian king, his mind turning over the day's events and tomorrow's possibilities. The weight of founding a dynasty presses upon him like a physical burden, Every decision creates precedents that will guide or constrain his successors. Every alliance shapes relationships that will endure for generations. Every enemy made today may threaten the kingdom decades hence. Hugh understands that his greatest challenge lies not in conquering territory or defeating enemies, but in transforming the very nature of French kingship. Previous rulers relied primarily on personal charisma and military prowess, qualities that died with each king and left the kingdom vulnerable to succession crises. Hugh seeks to create institutional foundations that will outlast individual personalities, establishing systems of law, administration, and succession that can maintain royal authority across the generations. The task requires patience, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to principles that sometimes conflict with immediate advantage. Hugh must often choose between popular decisions that would strengthen his personal position and difficult choices that serve long-term dynastic interests. The foundation he lays during these crucial early years will determine whether the Capetian dynasty survives the inevitable challenges that await future generations. The spring of 989 awakens the Ile de la Cité with the gentle sounds of renewed life. Hugh Capet rises with the dawn chorus, his chamber filled with the soft grey light that precedes sunrise. The harsh winter has passed, leaving behind the promise of warmer days and the urgent business of securing his fragile kingdom. Through his narrow window, he watches merchants already moving along the riverbank, their carts laden with goods that speak to the slowly reviving trade networks his reign must protect and nurture. His morning routine adapts to the changing season. The bronze basin now holds water warmed by spring sunshine rather than kitchen fires, and his breath no longer forms clouds in the morning air. Yet the king's clothing remains practical rather than ornamental. Today he chooses a tunic of undyed wool, its natural cream colour complemented by a cloak of deep brown leather. The simplicity of his dress serves multiple purposes, demonstrating both humility appropriate to a Christian ruler and solidarity with subjects whose own garments reflect necessity rather than luxury. The Great Hall buzzes with increased activity as spring brings new challenges and opportunities. Messengers arrive with reports of Viking ships spotted off the Norman coast, their dragon-headed prows cutting through waters newly freed from winter ice. The raiders follow seasonal patterns as predictable as migrating birds, timing their return to coincide with the resumption of trade and travel that marks their prey's emergence from winter isolation. Hugh receives these reports while breaking his fast on fresh bread still warm from the ovens, accompanied by early spring vegetables from the castle gardens. His advisors gather around the wooden table, their faces reflecting the mixed relief and apprehension that spring always brings to medieval rulers. The season promises renewed prosperity, but also renewed threats, as enemies who spent winter planning their campaigns prepare to transform schemes into action. The king's questions probe beyond immediate tactical concerns to examine broader strategic implications. These Viking raids represent more than simple piracy. They test royal authority and reveal the kingdom's defensive capabilities to potential enemies throughout Europe. Hugh's response must demonstrate strength without overextending limited resources, sending clear messages to both foreign observers and domestic rivals about the new dynasty's competence and resolve. Following morning prayers in the chapel, where spring light streams through windows previously darkened by winter storms, Hugh convenes his council to address the Viking threat. The discussion reveals the complex calculations underlying medieval warfare. Direct military confrontation requires resources the young kingdom can ill afford, yet passive acceptance of raids would signal weakness that could encourage broader challenges to royal authority. The solution Hugh devises reflects his characteristic preference for subtle approaches over dramatic gestures. Rather than assembling costly armies for potentially futile pursuits of swift-moving raiders, he initiates a network of coastal watchers and signal fires that can provide early warning of approaching threats. Local lords receive royal authorization to strengthen their defences in exchange for commitments to mutual assistance and regular reporting to the crown. This defensive strategy serves multiple purposes beyond its immediate military objectives. The coordination required forces previously independent nobles to acknowledge royal authority in practical matters affecting their security. The communication networks established for military purposes can also serve commercial and administrative functions, gradually weaving the kingdom together through bonds of shared interest and mutual dependence. Hugh spends the morning reviewing maps with his military advisors, their fingers tracing coastlines and river systems that define both opportunities and vulnerabilities in the kingdom's geography. Medieval maps, drawn by monks and scholars, blend geographical knowledge with theological symbolism, showing Jerusalem at the center of the world while European kingdoms occupy peripheral positions. Yet for practical military planning, these documents provide essential information about distances, terrain, and strategic positions. The king's finger pauses at the mouth of the Seine, where the river meets the sea in a delta that provides natural harbors for both merchant vessels and Viking longships. Control of this crucial junction requires delicate negotiations with Norman dukes, whose own ancestors arrived as raiders before settling as rulers. Hugh must balance acknowledgement of their legitimate authority with assertion of royal oversight, maintaining relationships that serve mutual interests while establishing precedents for crown involvement in coastal defence. Mid-morning brings audiences with petitioners whose cases reveal the daily realities of life in the emerging French kingdom. A group of merchants from Rouen seeks royal protection for their trading expeditions up the Seine, offering customs revenues in exchange for guaranteed safe passage through royal territories. Their proposal illustrates the complex relationships between commerce and politics that characterize medieval governance, where economic activity depends heavily on political stability and mutual trust. Hugh listens carefully to their concerns, understanding that merchant prosperity strengthens the kingdom in ways beyond immediate tax revenues. Trade networks carry not only goods, but also information, diplomatic communications, and cultural influences that bind distant regions together. Protecting commerce serves political as well as economic purposes, demonstrating royal ability to maintain order while encouraging activities that benefit all subjects. The merchant's leader, a man whose fine woolen robes and silver belt fittings speak to successful enterprise, explains their specific needs with the practiced eloquence of someone accustomed to negotiating with various authorities. Their boats require secure moorings, their goods need protection from bandits, and their persons must be guaranteed safe conduct through territories controlled by different lords. Each requirement touches on fundamental questions about the nature and extent of royal authority in a fragmented political landscape. Hugh's response reveals his understanding of the delicate balance required to strengthen royal power without provoking resistance from established interests. He grants the merchant's requests, but structures his guarantees to require regular reporting and consultation, gradually establishing precedents for royal involvement in commercial regulation. The protection offered extends beyond simple safe conduct to include mediation services for disputes and standardized weights and measures that facilitate trade across territorial boundaries. Following the merchant audience, Hugh reviews a dispute between two abbeys over water rights along a tributary of the Loire. Medieval monasteries often control substantial wealth and territory, making their legal conflicts matters of significant political importance. The case requires careful consideration of canon law, royal prerogatives, and practical implications for agricultural productivity in the affected region. The disputing abbots present their arguments with the scholarly precision characteristic of learned churchmen, citing ancient charters, papal decrees, and precedents from throughout Christendom. Their legal expertise challenges Hugh to demonstrate equivalent knowledge while maintaining the dignity appropriate to royal judgment. The king's education serves him well in these encounters, allowing him to engage with complex theological and legal arguments while asserting secular authority over temporal matters. Hugh's eventual decision reflects his broader strategy of strengthening royal institutions through consistent application of legal principles. He rules that water rights, like all natural resources within the kingdom, ultimately derive from royal grant and remain subject to royal oversight. However, he confirms the traditional privileges of both monasteries while establishing procedures for future disputes that acknowledge royal arbitration authority. The afternoon brings visits from travelling scholars and diplomats who provide Hugh with information about developments throughout Europe. A learned monk from Cluny describes reforms being implemented in monasteries across Burgundy, reforms that strengthen ecclesiastical discipline while reducing secular interference in church affairs. These developments have implications for royal relationships with religious institutions, as reformed monasteries often prove more independent of local noble influence, but more responsive to papal authority. News from the German court reveals Emperor Otto III's continued interest in Italian affairs, where his attempts to restore imperial authority face resistance from pope and nobles alike. The young emperor's struggles provide valuable lessons for Hugh, demonstrating both the possibilities and limitations of royal power in an age when effective authority depends more on personal relationships than institutional structures. From Spain comes word of Christian kingdoms' ongoing conflicts with Islamic rulers, wars that drain resources while providing opportunities for military glory and territorial expansion. Hugh listens to these reports with the careful attention of a ruler who must balance competing demands on limited resources, understanding that involvement in distant conflicts could strengthen royal prestige while potentially weakening domestic authority. The king's evening meal takes place in a great hall filled with the sounds of renewed social activity as spring encourages travel and visiting. The long tables accommodate not only permanent residents, but also guests whose presence enriches court life while serving practical diplomatic purposes. Conversations flow in multiple languages as French nobles mingle with foreign visitors, creating networks of relationship and information that extend far beyond the kingdom's borders. Hugh moves among his guests with the practiced grace of a host who understands that hospitality serves political as well as social functions. Each conversation provides opportunities to gather information, test ideas, and build relationships that may prove valuable in future negotiations. The informal atmosphere of the evening meal allows for discussions that would be impossible in formal audiences, as wine and good food encourage frank exchanges of opinion and information. A Norman baron describes recent improvements to his castle's defences, innovations learned from contacts with builders who studied Islamic military architecture during pilgrimages to the Holy Land. His technical knowledge interests Hugh, who recognises that defensive capabilities directly affect political independence. Strong fortifications allow lords to resist external pressure while providing secure bases for extending authority into surrounding territories. Later in the evening, Hugh retires to his private chambers, where documents await his attention by lamplight. Spring's arrival has brought increased correspondence from throughout Europe, as rulers emerge from winter isolation to resume diplomatic communications and commercial negotiations. Each letter requires careful analysis, not only for its explicit contents, but also for subtle implications about the sender's intentions and circumstances. A message from the English court requests information about Viking movements along the French coast, suggesting potential cooperation in defensive measures. King Ethelred's inquiry reflects the broader challenge facing all European rulers in this age of maritime raiders, but it also provides opportunities for diplomatic initiatives that could strengthen both kingdoms while establishing precedents for international cooperation. Hugh dictates his responses with characteristic precision, choosing words that convey appropriate information, while protecting sensitive details about French defensive preparations. Medieval diplomacy requires constant attention to nuance, as misunderstood communications can trigger conflicts, while skillful correspondence can resolve disputes before they escalate to violence. The king's writing chamber fills with the scratch of quill pens on parchment, as scribes prepare multiple copies of important documents. Medieval communication systems require redundancy to ensure delivery, as letters travel uncertain routes through territories controlled by various authorities. Royal messengers carry duplicates of crucial correspondence, increasing chances that intended recipients will receive accurate information despite the hazards of medieval travel. As midnight approaches, Hugh makes his customary rounds through the castle, checking on guards and ensuring that all preparations for the night are complete. The spring air carries scents of growing things from gardens and fields beyond the castle walls, reminding him of the agricultural rhythms that underlie all medieval prosperity. The kingdom's strength ultimately depends on farmers' ability to produce surplus crops that can support non-agricultural activities, including royal government, military defence, and ecclesiastical institutions. In the castle chapel, Hugh offers final prayers of the day before a simple wooden crucifix illuminated by flickering candles. The quiet moments provide spiritual renewal while reinforcing the religious foundations of royal authority. Medieval kingship derives its legitimacy from divine sanction, making personal piety not merely a private matter, but a public necessity that demonstrates worthiness to rule. Returning to his chamber, Hugh finds servants have prepared his bed, with fresh linens and warming stones wrapped in soft wool. The simple comforts represent modest luxuries, appropriate to royal dignity, without excessive ostentation. As he settles beneath fur coverlets, the sounds of spring night filter through stone walls, water flowing in the Seine, night birds calling from riverside trees, and the distant sound of church bells marking the canonical hours. Yet sleep remains elusive, as Hugh's mind turns over the day's developments and their implications for the kingdom's future. Each decision creates ripples that spread throughout the complex network of relationships binding medieval society together. The Viking threat requires immediate attention, but responses must consider long-term consequences for royal authority and noble relationships. Commercial privileges granted to merchants establish precedents that will affect future economic development. Religious disputes resolved today influence church-state relationships for generations to come. The weight of founding a dynasty manifests not in single dramatic moments, but in countless daily choices that gradually shape institutions and expectations. Hugh understands that his greatest legacy will not be territorial conquests or military victories, but the systems of law, administration, and succession that enable future Capetian kings to rule effectively long after his death. The foundation he lays during these crucial early years must be strong enough to support centuries of dynastic continuity, while flexible enough to adapt to changing circumstances and challenges. The spring of 989 represents a turning point in Hugh's reign, as initial survival gives way to longer-term institutional development. The kingdom has weathered its first winter under Capetian rule, and enemies who might have exploited early weaknesses have discovered that the new dynasty possesses both competence and determination. Yet greater challenges lie ahead, as Hugh must transform temporary stability into permanent strength while building alliances that can survive the inevitable tests of succession and external pressure. In the darkness of his chamber, Hugh Capet contemplates the enormous responsibility he has accepted, understanding that his success or failure will determine not only his personal legacy, but the future of France itself. The teenage noble who first entered royal service could never have imagined the path that led to this moment, yet every experience has prepared him for the work that now defines his existence. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities, and Hugh must meet them with the wisdom, patience, and unwavering commitment that characterize effective medieval kingship. Kingship. The summer of 989 brings a different rhythm to royal life, as the longer days stretch the boundaries of what can be accomplished before darkness falls. Hugh Capet wakes before dawn to the gentle sound of rain pattering against the stone walls of his chamber, the summer storm having moved in during the night to break the oppressive heat that had settled over Paris like a heavy blanket. The air carries the fresh scent of washed earth and growing things, a reminder that the kingdom's prosperity ultimately flows from the soil that his subjects till with patient dedication. The king's morning ablutions take place by the light of a single candle, its flame steady in the still air. His servants have laid out garments appropriate for a day that promises to be both busy and warm. A linen under-tunic, bleached white and soft from repeated washing, provides comfort against his skin. Over this goes a tunic of deep blue wool, dyed with precious indigo that speaks to royal dignity without ostentatious display. The colour has been chosen carefully, as medieval symbolism invests each hue with meaning that courtiers and subjects alike understand without words. Hugh breaks his fast in the pre-dawn darkness, sharing simple fare with the handful of advisors who rise early to discuss the day's most pressing business. Bread still warm from the night's baking accompanies preserved fish and hard cheese, the meal accompanied by watered wine, flavoured with herbs from the castle gardens. The conversation flows quietly around the wooden table as men speak in hushed tones that respect the early hour while addressing matters that cannot wait for formal court sessions. A messenger arrived during the night from the eastern borders, bringing word that Hungarian raiders have crossed into the kingdom's frontier territories. The attack represents the latest in a series of probes testing the new dynasty's resolve and capabilities. Hugh listens to the report with the focused attention of a ruler who understands that early responses to such challenges often determine whether they escalate into major crises or fade away as unsuccessful experiments. The Hungarian threat requires different considerations than Viking raids along the coast. These inland raiders move on horseback rather than ships, striking swiftly at isolated settlements before disappearing into the vast forests that cover much of eastern France. Their mobility makes direct pursuit nearly impossible, while their knowledge of local terrain gives them advantages that royal forces struggle to overcome. Hugh must devise responses that protect his subjects without exhausting resources in futile chases through trackless wilderness. Following his morning meal, the king makes his way to the castle chapel, where dawn prayers provide spiritual preparation for the day's challenges. The small stone chamber echoes with the voices of monks chanting the canonical hours, their Latin syllables rising toward heaven like incense smoke. Hugh kneels on the cold floor, his crown set aside, becoming simply another soul seeking divine guidance in an uncertain world. The ritual provides not only personal comfort, but also public demonstration of the piety that legitimizes Christian kingship. After prayers, Hugh convenes his council in the Great Hall, where advisors and officials gather to address the Hungarian situation and other pressing matters. The morning light streaming through narrow windows illuminates faces marked by the serious concentration that characterizes men dealing with life and death decisions. The king's throne, carved from solid oak and adorned with simple bronze fittings, serves more as a working chair than a symbol of majesty, as Hugh leans forward to examine maps and documents spread across a nearby table. The discussion reveals the complex strategic calculations underlying medieval defensive planning. Direct military confrontation with the Hungarian raiders would require assembling forces from across the kingdom, a process that takes weeks while enemies strike and withdraw within days. Yet passive acceptance of such attacks could signal weakness that encourages further aggression while undermining royal authority in frontier regions where loyalty depends heavily on effective protection. Hugh's approach to the Hungarian problem demonstrates his characteristic preference for systematic solutions over dramatic gestures. Rather than launching costly expeditions into uncertain terrain, he authorizes the construction of fortified refuges where local populations can shelter during raids. These defensive positions, strategically placed along likely attack routes, provide security for civilians while creating bases from which royal forces can launch coordinated counterattacks when opportunities arise. The fortification project serves multiple purposes beyond immediate military needs. The construction work provides employment for craftsmen and labourers during the agricultural season when farm work cannot fully occupy rural populations. The coordination required forces local lords to cooperate in planning and resource sharing, gradually building networks of mutual dependence that strengthen royal authority. Most importantly, the visible commitment to frontier defense demonstrates that the new dynasty takes seriously its obligation to protect all subjects, regardless of their distance from the royal court. Mid-morning brings audiences with petitioners whose cases reflect the daily complexities of governing a medieval kingdom. A group of pilgrims seeks royal protection for their journey to the shrine of Saint Martin at Tours, offering prayers for the king's soul in exchange for safe conduct through territories controlled by various nobles. Their request illustrates the intersection of spiritual and temporal authority that characterizes medieval society, where religious devotion requires political cooperation to achieve practical expression. Hugh grants the pilgrims' request, while using the opportunity to strengthen relationships with lords along their planned route. The safe conduct letters he provides establish precedents for royal involvement in religious travel, while creating obligations for cooperation that extend beyond the immediate situation. Medieval governance often advances through such incremental steps, as individual cases gradually establish broader principles and expectations. The morning session continues with a complex inheritance dispute involving three brothers who claim different portions of their deceased father's estate. Medieval inheritance law combines Roman legal principles with Germanic customs and local traditions, creating a framework that often generates as many problems as it solves. The case requires Hugh to navigate competing claims while considering broader implications for property rights and succession practices throughout the kingdom. The eldest brother claims the entire estate under primogeniture principles that would concentrate wealth and authority in single hands. The second brother argues for equal division that would provide all siblings with independent means of support. The youngest brother, who entered religious life before their father's death, seeks only enough property to endow a small monastery where prayers can be offered for the family's souls. Each position reflects different values and priorities that medieval society struggles to balance. Hugh's eventual decision reveals his understanding of the delicate relationships between individual justice and social stability. He awards the primary inheritance to the eldest brother while requiring provision of appropriate support for his siblings, establishing precedents that protect both primogeniture succession and family obligations. The youngest brother receives sufficient land for his monastic foundation, demonstrating royal support for religious institutions while ensuring that family wealth serves spiritual as well as temporal purposes. Following the morning's judicial business, Hugh meets privately with his treasurer to review the kingdom's financial situation. Medieval royal finances operate on principles vastly different from modern governmental budgeting, depending heavily on personal relationships and traditional obligations rather than systematic taxation. The king's revenues derive from his own estates, feudal obligations owed by vassals, customs duties from trade, and various fees and fines collected through royal courts. The treasurer's reports reveal both strengths and vulnerabilities in the royal financial position. Income from the king's personal domains remains steady, reflecting competent management and favourable weather that has produced good harvests. However, collections from feudal obligations show worrying gaps as some nobles delay or reduce their traditional payments, testing whether the new dynasty will enforce ancient agreements or accept reduced compliance. Hugh reviews each case of delinquent payment with careful attention to the political implications of different response options. Aggressive collection efforts could provoke confrontations that drain royal resources while potentially driving wavering nobles into open opposition. Yet excessive tolerance of non-compliance would encourage further challenges while reducing revenues needed for essential governmental functions. The balance requires constant adjustment based on changing circumstances and individual relationships. The king's approach to financial management reflects his broader strategy of strengthening royal authority through patient consistency rather than dramatic displays of power. Delinquent nobles receive polite but firm reminders of their obligations, accompanied by offers of modified payment schedules that acknowledge temporary difficulties while maintaining ultimate compliance expectations. The strategy preserves relationships while establishing clear boundaries for acceptable behavior. Afternoon brings visits from foreign merchants and traveling scholars who provide Hugh with information about developments throughout Europe and beyond. A Jewish trader from Córdoba describes the sophisticated financial instruments used in Islamic Spain, where letters of credit enable commercial transactions across vast distances without the risks of transporting precious metals through bandit-infested territories. His knowledge offers insights into economic techniques that could strengthen French commerce while reducing the costs and dangers of long-distance trade. The merchant's presence in the royal court reflects Hugh's pragmatic approach to religious and ethnic diversity within his kingdom. Medieval Christian rulers face constant pressure to restrict or exclude non-Christian populations, yet practical governance often benefits from the knowledge and resources that diverse communities provide. Hugh navigates these tensions by maintaining formal respect for Christian doctrine while protecting useful subjects whose contributions strengthen royal authority and economic prosperity. A Byzantine diplomat brings news of developments in the Eastern Empire, where Emperor Basil II continues his campaigns against Bulgarian rebels while managing complex relationships with various Islamic powers. The information provides valuable insights into military techniques and diplomatic strategies that may prove relevant to French circumstances, as Hugh must balance similar pressures from multiple directions while building strength for future challenges. The diplomat's reports also reveal the continuing importance of trade routes connecting Western Europe with Constantinople and beyond to the riches of Asia. French merchants could potentially tap into these networks, bringing unprecedented wealth to the kingdom while creating new sources of royal revenue through customs duties and commercial taxes. However, such opportunities require political stability and military security that Hugh is still working to establish throughout his territories. As evening approaches, Hugh reviews correspondence with his scribes in the writing chamber, where oil lamps provide steady light for detailed work. Summer's longer days allow extended sessions of administrative business, as complex documents can be prepared and reviewed without the constraints imposed by winter's early darkness. The king's personal involvement in correspondence reflects both the limited size of royal administration and his understanding that diplomatic communications require careful attention to nuance and implication. A letter from Pope John XV addresses questions about ecclesiastical jurisdiction in frontier territories, where Hungarian raids have disrupted normal church administration. The papal response supports royal efforts to maintain religious services while acknowledging practical difficulties created by ongoing violence. The correspondence illustrates the complex relationships between secular and spiritual authority that characterize medieval governance, where cooperation serves mutual interests despite occasional jurisdictional conflicts. Hugh dictates responses that balance respect for papal authority with assertion of royal prerogatives in temporal matters affecting church property and personnel. Medieval diplomacy requires constant attention to precedent and protocol, as seemingly minor disputes can escalate into major conflicts if not handled with appropriate sensitivity. The king's legal training serves him well in crafting language that advances royal interests while maintaining cordial relationships with ecclesiastical authorities. The summer evening brings cooler air and the sounds of increased activity as servants prepare for the day's final meal. The great hall fills with the aromas of roasted meat and fresh bread, while musicians tune their instruments for entertainment that will follow the feast. Hugh moves among his guests with practiced ease, understanding that these informal gatherings provide opportunities for relationship building that formal audiences cannot achieve. Tonight's gathering includes visitors from throughout France and beyond, creating a diverse assembly that reflects the kingdom's growing reputation as a stable and prosperous realm. Norman nobles mingle with Burgundian merchants, while scholars from various monasteries engage in theological discussions with foreign diplomats. The conversations flow in multiple languages, as Latin, French, and various regional dialects blend in the animated discussions that characterize medieval court life. Hugh pauses to speak with a group of young knights recently returned from pilgrimages to Rome and the Holy Land. Their accounts of Italian politics and Eastern Christian practices provide valuable intelligence, while their obvious devotion demonstrates the continuing vitality of religious faith throughout the kingdom. The king listens carefully to their descriptions of fortifications and military techniques observed during their travels, understanding that such knowledge may prove crucial in future conflicts. Following the evening feast, Hugh retires to his private chambers where the day's final business awaits attention. A collection of reports from provincial administrators reveals the complex challenges of governing territories that remain largely autonomous despite theoretical royal authority. Local customs and legal traditions vary significantly across different regions, creating administrative puzzles that require careful navigation to avoid provoking resistance while gradually extending royal influence. The king reviews each report with attention to both immediate issues and longer-term patterns that might indicate emerging problems or opportunities. A dispute between merchants and local nobles in Lyon requires diplomatic intervention that balances commercial interests with traditional privileges. Construction delays on fortification projects along the eastern frontier need investigation to determine whether problems stem from resource shortages, administrative incompetence, or deliberate obstruction by opponents of royal policy. As midnight approaches, Hugh makes his customary inspection of castle defences, checking on guards and ensuring that all security measures remain properly maintained. The summer night brings different challenges than winter darkness, as longer days provide more opportunities for potential enemies to observe royal activities, while warm weather encourages increased travel that could mask hostile movements. The king's attention to such details reflects his understanding that royal security depends on constant vigilance rather than dramatic defensive measures. In the castle chapel, Hugh offers final prayers before a wooden crucifix illuminated by the eternal flame that burns in honor of Christ and the saints. The quiet moments provide spiritual preparation for sleep while reinforcing the religious foundations that legitimize his authority as God's appointed representative on earth. Medieval kingship requires not only political skill, but also genuine piety that demonstrates worthiness to exercise divinely sanctioned power over Christian subjects. Returning to his chamber, Hugh finds his bed prepared with fresh linens and the windows open to admit cooling night breezes that carry the sense of summer gardens and the sound of water flowing in the Seine. The simple comforts represent appropriate royal dignity without the excessive luxury that might provoke criticism from religious authorities or resentful subjects. As he settles beneath light coverlets suitable for the warm season, the king's mind turns over the day's events and their implications for the kingdom's continuing development. The Hungarian threat requires ongoing attention, but Hugh's systematic approach to frontier defense promises better results than hasty military expeditions that might achieve temporary victories while draining resources needed for long-term security. The fortification projects will take months to complete, yet their construction demonstrates royal commitment to protecting all subjects while creating infrastructure that will serve multiple purposes for generations to come. Financial management continues to challenge royal administration, as traditional revenue sources prove inadequate for expanding governmental responsibilities, while new forms of taxation require careful implementation to avoid provoking resistance. Hugh's patient approach to collection problems maintains essential relationships while gradually establishing precedents for more systematic royal involvement in economic affairs throughout the kingdom. The diverse visitors and correspondence that fill royal days provide essential intelligence about developments throughout Europe and beyond, enabling informed decision-making while building networks of relationship and communication that strengthen the kingdom's international position. Hugh's reputation for fair dealing and competent governance attracts merchants, scholars, and diplomats whose presence enriches court life while serving practical political purposes. Yet beneath these daily successes lies the constant awareness that dynastic survival requires more than individual competence or temporary stability. Hugh must create institutions and expectations that will enable future Capetian kings to rule effectively long after his death, establishing precedents and relationships that can weather the inevitable challenges of succession and external pressure. The foundation he builds during these crucial years will determine whether the dynasty endures for generations or collapses when tested by circumstances beyond any individual ruler's control. In the darkness of his chamber, Hugh Capet contemplates the enormous responsibility he has accepted as founder of what he hopes will become one of Europe's most enduring royal dynasties. The weight of that obligation manifests not in single dramatic moments, but in countless daily decisions that gradually shape the character and capabilities of royal government. Every choice creates precedents. Every relationship influences future possibilities. Every success or failure affects the kingdom's long-term prospects for unity and prosperity under Capetian rule. The transformation of Hugh's reign from survival to institutional development marks a crucial turning point in French history, as temporary expedients give way to systematic reforms that will influence governmental practices for centuries to come. The young dynasty has weathered its initial challenges while building foundations for future growth. Yet greater tests lie ahead as external pressures and internal tensions continue to threaten the fragile unity that Hugh has worked so patiently to achieve. The autumn of 990 brings a golden hue to the forests surrounding Paris, as Hugh Capet's third year as king unfolds with the steady rhythm of established authority. The leaves drift past his chamber window in the early morning light, their amber dance reflecting the subtle changes that have transformed both kingdom and monarch since those uncertain first months of his reign. Hugh rises with the dawn, his movements now carrying the unconscious confidence of a man who has found his place in the great wheel of medieval governance. His morning preparations have evolved into a precise ritual that reflects both practical necessity and symbolic meaning. The bronze basin holds water warmed by kitchen fires that burn constantly in the depths of his castle, tended by servants whose loyalty has been earned through consistent fairness and genuine concern for their welfare. Hugh's clothing speaks to the season and his evolving understanding of royal dignity, a tunic of forest green wool, woven with threads of gold that catch the morning light, covers a linen undergarment bleached to perfect whiteness. His belt, crafted from supple leather and studded with silver rather than bronze, holds an eating knife whose handle bears the carved fleur-de-lis that will one day become the symbol of French royalty. The great hall awakens to the sounds of efficient preparation as servants arrange tables and benches for the morning meal. Hugh's household has grown considerably since his coronation, not through imperial ambition, but from practical necessity, as the scope of royal administration expands to meet the kingdom's needs. Scribes and clerks now occupy chambers that once stood empty, their quills scratching across parchment in the steady production of writs, charters, and correspondence that bind the realm together through networks of written authority. Breaking his fast at the high table, Hugh shares the morning meal with advisors whose presence reflects the institutionalization of royal government. No longer does he rely solely on personal relationships and informal consultation, though these remain important elements of his rule. Instead, a structured council has emerged, with specific officials responsible for military affairs, financial administration, judicial oversight, and diplomatic correspondence. The conversation around the table flows with the easy familiarity of men who have worked together long enough to anticipate each other's thoughts and concerns. Reports arrive with the dawn from throughout the kingdom, carried by mounted messengers who follow established routes linking royal strongholds and administrative centres. The network has grown organically from Hugh's early efforts to maintain communication with distant territories, evolving into a system that rivals anything seen since the height of Carolingian power. Today's dispatches bring news of the grape harvest in Burgundy, where favourable weather promises excellent vintages that will strengthen both local prosperity and royal revenues through customs duties on wine exports. From the Norman territories, comes word that Duke Richard has successfully negotiated a truce with Viking raiders who'd been troubling the coastal settlements throughout the summer months. The agreement reflects the complex realities of medieval diplomacy, where former enemies become allies through carefully structured arrangements that serve mutual interests. The Vikings will receive tribute payments and trading privileges in exchange for their commitment to raid English rather than French territories, a solution that satisfies immediate security needs while creating potential complications for future diplomatic relationships. The Eastern Frontiers report continued calm following Hugh's systematic fortification efforts, with the network of defensive positions proving effective in deterring Hungarian raiders, who have turned their attention to easier targets in the German territories. The success validates Hugh's patient approach to frontier defense, demonstrating that systematic preparation often achieves better results than dramatic military expeditions that capture immediate attention but fail to address underlying security challenges. Following the morning meal, Hugh makes his way to the castle chapel, where the daily round of prayers provides both spiritual nourishment and political necessity. The stone chamber has been enriched over the past 3 years with gifts from grateful subjects and allied rulers, its walls now adorned with tapestries depicting scenes from the life of Christ, while silver candlesticks replace the simple wooden holders that once provided the only illumination. These improvements reflect not royal vanity, but the understanding that appropriate dignity enhances rather than diminishes the sacred character of royal authority. The king kneels before an altar, now graced with a golden cross donated by the Abbey of Saint-Denis, whose abbot has become one of Hugh's most trusted advisors in matters involving the complex relationships between secular and ecclesiastical power. The morning prayers include specific petitions for the welfare of the kingdom and its people, as Hugh understands that his authority derives ultimately from divine sanction and requires constant renewal through appropriate devotion and righteous conduct. After prayers, the royal court convenes in the Great Hall, where the business of governance unfolds with increasing sophistication and formality. The wooden throne has been replaced with a seat carved from marble quarried in the royal domains, its surface polished to mirror-like smoothness, while its back bears inscriptions in Latin that proclaim Hugh's titles and the divine source of his authority. Yet the king uses this impressive seat not as a prop for distant majesty, but as a working platform from which to conduct the detailed business of medieval administration. The morning session begins with judicial cases that reveal both the growing scope of royal authority and the persistent challenges of governing a realm where local customs often conflict with emerging national policies. A dispute between 2 monasteries over fishing rights in the Loire has escalated into a complex legal battle involving questions of papal jurisdiction, royal prerogatives, and ancient privileges granted by previous rulers whose authority the Capetian dynasty has inherited along with their territories. Hugh approaches the case with the methodical precision that has become his hallmark, examining documents and hearing testimony with the focused attention of a trained lawyer who understands that legal precedents shape future possibilities as much as current justice. The monasteries have retained scholars to argue their respective positions, turning the royal court into a venue for intellectual debate that demonstrates the kingdom's growing reputation as a centre of learning and sophisticated legal reasoning. The abbot of the monastery at Orléans presents his case with the polished eloquence of a man educated in the finest cathedral schools, citing ancient charters and papal decrees that support his community's claims to exclusive fishing privileges along a specified stretch of the river. His arguments reveal deep knowledge of canon law and historical precedent, challenging Hugh to demonstrate equivalent expertise while maintaining the dignity appropriate to royal judgment. The competing monastery's representative, equally learned but taking a different approach, argues that fishing rights represent temporal rather than spiritual privileges and therefore fall under royal rather than papal jurisdiction. His position supports broader royal authority while potentially creating conflicts with ecclesiastical leaders who claim extensive autonomy in matters affecting monastic properties and privileges. Hugh's eventual decision reflects his characteristic ability to find solutions that advance royal interests while preserving essential relationships with important constituencies. He confirms both monasteries' fishing rights while establishing seasonal rotations that ensure equitable access to the disputed waters, creating a precedent for royal arbitration in similar cases while avoiding direct challenges to either papal or monastic authority. The solution satisfies immediate needs while demonstrating that royal justice can produce better outcomes than prolonged litigation or private warfare. The morning continues with administrative business that reveals the growing complexity of royal government, as Hugh's authority extends into areas previously managed by local nobles or ecclesiastical institutions. Provincial governors submit regular reports that require royal review and response, creating paperwork that keeps scribes busy throughout the day, while providing Hugh with detailed knowledge of conditions throughout his territories. A report from the governor of Champagne describes successful negotiations with German merchants seeking to establish permanent trading posts in French territory. The proposed arrangements would bring significant commercial benefits while creating new sources of royal revenue through customs duties and licensing fees. However, the German merchants' requests for legal privileges and exemptions from certain local regulations raise questions about the balance between encouraging foreign investment and maintaining royal authority over commercial activities within the kingdom. Hugh reviews the proposal with careful attention to both immediate benefits and longer-term implications for royal sovereignty and commercial policy. The privileges requested by the German merchants are not unreasonable given medieval trading practices, yet granting them could establish precedents that future commercial partners might exploit to demand excessive concessions. The king's response demonstrates his understanding of the delicate calculations underlying medieval diplomacy and commercial regulation. After approving modified terms that satisfy the merchant's essential needs while protecting royal prerogatives, Hugh turns his attention to a complex inheritance case that illustrates the ongoing challenges of implementing consistent legal standards throughout a realm where local customs vary significantly between different regions and social groups. The case involves a merchant family from Rouen, whose patriarch died without male heirs, leaving substantial properties and commercial enterprises to be divided among 3 daughters according to Norman customs that differ markedly from practices elsewhere in the kingdom. The merchant's widow seeks royal confirmation of her daughter's inheritance rights, fearing that relatives from other regions might challenge the succession based on legal traditions that favour male heirs or restrict female property ownership. Her petition raises fundamental questions about the relationship between local customs and royal authority, as Hugh must balance respect for established traditions with the need to create consistent legal frameworks that can operate effectively throughout his territories. The case requires careful consideration of competing legal principles, family relationships, and economic implications that extend far beyond the immediate parties involved. The merchant family's enterprises include trading partnerships with English and Flemish companies, whose continued cooperation depends partly on confidence in the stability and predictability of French commercial law. Any decision that creates uncertainty about succession practices could damage the kingdom's reputation among foreign merchants while potentially disrupting established trade relationships. Hugh's approach to the case reflects his broader strategy of gradual legal harmonization that respects local traditions while establishing overarching royal authority in matters of fundamental importance. He confirms the daughters' inheritance rights while requiring them to acknowledge royal oversight of their commercial activities, creating precedents that strengthen both women's property rights and royal involvement in large-scale commercial enterprises. The midday break provides opportunities for informal consultation with advisors and visitors whose presence enriches royal decision-making while serving important diplomatic and intelligence-gathering functions. Today's gathering includes a delegation of merchants from Venice whose proposals for expanded Mediterranean trade could transform French commercial relationships while creating new sources of wealth and royal revenue. The Venetian merchants describe sophisticated financial instruments and trading techniques developed through their extensive contacts with Byzantine and Islamic commercial centers. offering to share this knowledge in exchange for preferential access to French markets and protection for their agents operating in royal territories. Their proposals represent unprecedented opportunities for economic development, yet they also pose challenges to existing commercial relationships and traditional approaches to regulating foreign trade. Hugh listens carefully to the Venetians' presentations while considering their implications for domestic industries and established trading partnerships. Medieval commerce operates through complex networks of personal relationships and mutual obligations that can be disrupted by new competitors or innovative techniques that challenge traditional practices. The king must balance the benefits of commercial innovation against the risks of destabilizing arrangements that provide livelihoods for significant numbers of his subjects. The afternoon brings audiences with regional nobles whose relationship with the crown reflects the gradual transformation of feudal obligations from personal bonds between individuals into institutional relationships that survive changes in personnel and circumstances. The Count of Anjou arrives to discuss military service obligations for the coming year, seeking modifications to traditional requirements that reflect changing conditions along the kingdom's southern borders. The Count's territories face increasing pressure from ambitious neighbours who test the boundaries of established jurisdictions while seeking opportunities for territorial expansion. His military resources, adequate for defending against traditional threats, may prove insufficient if conflicts escalate beyond the level of border skirmishes and isolated raids. He seeks royal authorization to recruit additional forces while requesting financial assistance for upgrading fortifications and acquiring new weapons that reflect advancing military technology. Hugh approaches these discussions with understanding of the complex relationships between royal authority and noble autonomy that characterize medieval governance. Excessive royal control over military affairs could provoke resistance from nobles who value their traditional independence. Yet inadequate coordination could leave the kingdom vulnerable to external threats that require unified responses. The balance requires constant adjustment based on changing circumstances and individual relationships. The king's response demonstrates his skill in crafting solutions that serve multiple purposes while maintaining essential flexibility for future adjustments. He authorizes the Count's military expansion while requiring regular reports on recruitment and deployment, establishing precedents for royal oversight without creating rigid controls that might prove counterproductive in rapidly changing situations. Financial assistance comes with conditions that strengthen royal influence while respecting noble dignity and traditional privileges. Following the afternoon audiences, Hugh reviews financial reports that reveal both the growing prosperity of his kingdom and the increasing costs of expanded governmental activities. Royal revenues have increased significantly since his accession, reflecting successful policies that encourage economic development while improving collection efficiency for traditional sources of income. However, expenditures have grown even faster as the scope of royal administration expands to meet the needs of an increasingly complex realm. The Treasurer's reports show substantial investments in infrastructure projects that will provide long-term benefits while requiring immediate outlays that strain current resources. Road construction and bridge building facilitate commerce and communication while creating employment for craftsmen and labourers during agricultural off-seasons. Fortification projects enhance security while demonstrating royal commitment to protecting all subjects regardless of their distance from the royal court. Hugh examines each expenditure category with the detailed attention of a ruler who understands that financial management directly affects political stability and governmental effectiveness. Military costs consume the largest portion of royal revenues, reflecting both the ongoing need for frontier defence and the expanded obligations that come with growing royal authority throughout the kingdom. Administrative expenses have increased as the bureaucracy grows to handle more complex responsibilities, while diplomatic activities require resources for maintaining embassies and conducting negotiations with foreign rulers. The king's approach to financial planning reflects his characteristic preference for systematic solutions over temporary expedients. Rather than relying solely on traditional revenue sources that may prove inadequate for expanding needs, he has initiated studies of new taxation methods that could provide stable funding for governmental activities, while distributing costs fairly among different social groups and economic sectors. Evening approaches as Hugh completes the day's official business and prepares for the social activities that serve important political and diplomatic functions while providing relaxation from the constant pressures of royal responsibility. The Great Hall undergoes transformation as servants clear away the detritus of administrative work and prepare for the evening feast that brings together residents and guests in the informal atmosphere that encourages frank discussion and relationship building. Tonight's gathering reflects the international character that increasingly defines Hugh's court, as his reputation for wisdom and fairness attracts visitors from throughout Europe and beyond. A delegation of scholars from the cathedral school at Chartres mingles with merchants from Flanders and diplomats from the papal court, creating conversations that blend intellectual discourse with practical politics and commercial planning. Hugh moves among his guests with practiced ease, understanding that these informal interactions often accomplish more than formal negotiations in building the relationships that support effective governance and international cooperation. He pauses to discuss theological questions with the scholars from Chartres, whose expertise in both sacred and secular learning provides valuable insights into the intellectual currents that shape contemporary European culture. The Flemish merchants describe recent innovations in textile production that could revolutionize clothing manufacture while creating new opportunities for French wool producers who supply raw materials to foreign craftsmen. Their technical knowledge interests Hugh, who recognizes that industrial development could strengthen the kingdom's economic foundations while providing new sources of royal revenue through taxation and regulation of expanded commercial activities. Papal diplomats share information about developments in Rome, where political conflicts continue to complicate relationships between secular and ecclesiastical authorities throughout Christendom. Their reports provide valuable intelligence about papal policies and priorities that affect French interests, while offering opportunities for diplomatic initiatives that could strengthen the kingdom's international position and religious authority. Following the evening feast, Hugh retires to his private study, where correspondence and administrative documents require attention before the day can end. The chamber has been enlarged and refurnished to accommodate the growing volume of paperwork that accompanies expanded royal responsibilities, with additional tables and storage chests providing space for the books, maps, and documents that inform royal decision-making. Tonight's correspondence includes letters from throughout Europe that reveal the continuing importance of diplomatic relationships in maintaining peace and prosperity among Christian kingdoms. The English court requests information about French experiences with Viking raids and defensive measures, suggesting potential cooperation in addressing common threats from Scandinavian warriors who continue to probe both kingdoms' coastal defences. Hugh's response reflects his understanding of the benefits that flow from international cooperation, while protecting sensitive information about French military capabilities and strategic planning. He offers to share general principles and techniques while maintaining appropriate discretion about specific fortifications and defensive arrangements that could lose effectiveness if their details became widely known among potential enemies. A letter from the German Emperor Otto III addresses questions about territorial boundaries along the eastern frontier, where recent Hungarian raids have created confusion about jurisdictional responsibilities and mutual defense obligations. The imperial correspondence reveals both respect for Hugh's growing authority and subtle pressure for closer cooperation in addressing common security challenges that affect both kingdoms. The king's response demonstrates his skill in diplomatic correspondence that advances French interests while maintaining cordial relationships with powerful neighbours whose friendship serves mutual benefits. He expresses willingness to cooperate in frontier defence while asserting French sovereignty over territories that might otherwise become subjects of imperial intervention or influence. As midnight approaches, Hugh makes his customary inspection of castle defences, checking on guards and ensuring that security measures remain properly maintained despite the social activities that have filled the evening hours. The autumn night brings different challenges than the summer heat or winter cold, as comfortable temperatures encourage increased travel, while shortened days provide cover for potential enemies who might exploit seasonal transitions. In the castle chapel, Hugh offers final prayers before retiring, kneeling before the golden cross that reflects the flickering light of votive candles, maintained by monks whose presence ensures continuous prayer for the welfare of king and kingdom. The quiet moments provide spiritual renewal while reinforcing the religious foundations that legitimize royal authority as divine sanction expressed through earthly governance. Returning to his chamber, Hugh finds his bed prepared with woolen blankets appropriate for the cooling season, while braziers provide warmth against the chill that penetrates stone walls as autumn progresses toward winter. The simple comforts represent appropriate royal dignity without excessive luxury that might provoke criticism from religious authorities or resentful subjects who struggle to meet their own basic needs. As he settles beneath warm coverlets, Hugh's mind reviews the day's accomplishments and challenges while considering their implications for the kingdom's continuing development and the dynasty's long-term survival. Each successful resolution of disputes or problems strengthens royal authority while creating precedents that will guide future decisions. Every alliance formed or relationship strengthened contributes to the network of support that enables effective governance while deterring potential challenges to Capetian rule. The judicial cases heard today demonstrate the growing sophistication of royal administration and the increasing willingness of subjects throughout the kingdom to seek royal justice rather than relying on local nobles or ecclesiastical authorities for dispute resolution. This trend strengthens royal authority while creating additional responsibilities that require careful management to maintain quality and consistency in legal decisions. Commercial and diplomatic developments reveal the expanding scope of French international relationships as Hugh's reputation for competent governance attracts foreign merchants and diplomats who see opportunities for mutually beneficial cooperation. These relationships strengthen the kingdom economically, while providing intelligence and influence that enhance French security and international standing. Military and security matters continue to require constant attention as external threats evolve and internal challenges demand ongoing vigilance and systematic responses. Hugh's approach to defense through systematic preparation and international cooperation has proven effective in maintaining peace while building capabilities that can address future challenges as they emerge. The transformation of Hugh's reign from uncertain beginnings to established authority reflects both personal growth in royal skills and institutional development that creates foundations for dynastic continuity. The systems and precedents established during these crucial years will enable future Capetian kings to build upon, rather than recreate, the basic structures of royal government, providing continuity that strengthens royal authority across generations. Yet Hugh understands that dynastic survival requires more than institutional competence or temporary success in addressing immediate challenges. The Capetian dynasty must prove its ability to adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining the essential characteristics that justify royal authority and command popular loyalty. Future kings will face different problems requiring different solutions, yet they must do so within frameworks of law, custom, and expectation that Hugh's reign is now establishing. In the darkness of his chamber, Hugh Capet contemplates the remarkable transformation that has occurred since those uncertain first months, when his authority extended little beyond the walls of his own castle. The kingdom has achieved a stability and prosperity that seemed impossible just 3 years ago, while royal authority has expanded into areas previously controlled by local nobles or left ungoverned entirely. These achievements represent not personal triumph, but institutional success that creates possibilities for continued development under future Capetian rulers. The challenges ahead remain formidable as external pressures and internal tensions continue to test the kingdom's unity and the dynasty's resilience. Yet the foundations laid during these crucial early years provide reasons for cautious optimism about the future, as systematic approaches to governance and diplomacy create capabilities that can address evolving challenges while maintaining the stability and prosperity that benefit all subjects of the growing French kingdom under Capetian rule. The winter of 991 settles over the Seine, like a familiar embrace as Hugh Capet enters his 4th year of rule. The frost painting delicate patterns on his chamber windows, while the river below moves sluggishly between banks lined with bare willows. The king wakes in the pre-dawn darkness to the sound of wind rattling the wooden shutters, his breath visible in the cold air as he rises from beneath layers of wool and fur that have barely kept the chill at bay through the long night. His morning routine has adapted to the harsh season with practical efficiency born of experience. Servants arrive with heated stones wrapped in cloth, placing them strategically around the chamber, while others tend the brazier that provides the room's primary warmth. Hugh's clothing reflects both seasonal necessity and his evolved understanding of royal presentation. Heavy wool leggings, dyed a rich burgundy, cover his legs, while a thick tunic of midnight blue provides warmth and dignity. Over this goes a cloak lined with marten fur, its deep brown exterior concealing the luxury within, while presenting an appropriately modest appearance to subjects who struggle against winter's hardships. The great hall echoes with the sounds of morning preparation as servants move efficiently through routines perfected over years of service. The massive hearth blazes with split oak logs, their flames casting dancing shadows on walls, now hung with tapestries that provide both decoration and insulation against the penetrating cold. Hugh breaks his fast at the high table, where steam rises from wooden bowls containing thick porridge enriched with honey and dried fruits, accompanied by bread still warm from ovens that burn continuously throughout the winter months. His advisors gather around the table with faces marked by the serious concentration that winter business demands, their woolen robes and fur-trimmed cloaks speaking to the practical realities of governing during the season when travel becomes treacherous and communication grows sporadic. The conversation flows quietly as men discuss matters that cannot wait for spring's return, their voices mixing with the crack of burning logs and the distant sound of wind moaning through the castle's stone passages. Reports arrive with the dawn despite winter's challenges, carried by hardy messengers who brave frozen roads and bitter weather to maintain the communication networks that bind the kingdom together. Today's dispatches bring news from the monastery at Cluny, where the abbot reports successful completion of new construction projects despite weather delays that tested the determination of craftsmen and labourers working in conditions that would challenge the most dedicated souls. From the Eastern Territories comes word that the fortification program initiated during the previous summer has proven its worth as winter quarters for garrison forces who maintain vigilance against potential threats, even when snow covers the landscape and ice blocks many rivers. The defensive positions provide not only military security, but also economic benefits as soldiers spend their wages in local markets, while their families settle permanently in communities that grow around these strategic strongholds. The Norman coast reports unusual quiet, as winter storms keep Viking longships in distant harbours, providing respite that allows coastal communities to repair damage from summer raids, while preparing defences for the inevitable return of warmer weather and renewed maritime threats. The seasonal pattern offers opportunities for diplomatic contact with Scandinavian leaders who may prefer negotiated agreements to the risks and uncertainties of continued warfare. Following the morning meal, Hugh makes his way through corridors lined with flickering torches to the castle chapel, where morning prayers provide spiritual warmth against winter's physical and emotional challenges. The stone chamber holds heat from braziers positioned strategically around the altar, while thick tapestries depicting scenes of Christ's nativity remind all present of the divine light that shines through even the darkest seasons of human experience. The king kneels on cushions placed on the cold stone floor, his breath forming small clouds as he joins his voice to those of resident monks whose chanting fills the chamber with sacred music that seems to push back against winter's oppressive silence. The prayers include specific petitions for subjects throughout the kingdom who struggle against hunger, cold, and isolation that test faith and endurance during the months when nature seems hostile to human survival and prosperity. After prayers, the royal court convenes in the Great Hall, where the business of winter governance unfolds with methodical patience suited to the season's constraints and opportunities. The marble throne has been moved closer to the great hearth, allowing Hugh to conduct official business while benefiting from the massive fire's warmth. Thick carpets cover the stone floor around the throne, providing insulation while displaying the rich colours and intricate patterns that speak to royal dignity and the kingdom's growing prosperity. The morning session begins with review of granary reports from throughout the realm, documents that reveal both the success of harvest policies implemented during previous years and the ongoing challenges of ensuring adequate food supplies during months when agricultural production ceases entirely. Royal granaries established in major towns provide security against famine, while creating opportunities for profitable trade with regions that experience shortages due to poor harvests or transportation difficulties. Hugh examines each report with the focused attention of a ruler who understands that winter survival depends on careful planning and systematic distribution of resources accumulated during more productive seasons. The granary at Orleans reports sufficient stocks to supply local needs while maintaining reserves for emergency distribution to surrounding areas that may experience unexpected shortages. Storage facilities at Tours and Reims show similar abundance, reflecting successful coordination between royal administration and local authorities who share responsibility for community welfare. The reports also reveal the complex relationships between royal policy and local customs that govern food distribution during times of scarcity. Traditional obligations require nobles to provide for their dependents during winter months, yet these arrangements sometimes prove inadequate when harvests fail or unexpected demands strain available resources. Royal granaries supplement traditional systems while establishing precedents for crown involvement in local welfare that strengthen royal authority through demonstrated concern for subject welfare. A delegation of merchants from Burgundy seeks royal arbitration in a dispute involving wine shipments that froze during transport through territories where local lords imposed unexpected delays for their own commercial advantage. The case illustrates the challenges of maintaining trade during winter months, when weather conditions create vulnerabilities that unscrupulous authorities exploit for personal benefit, at the expense of legitimate commerce and royal revenues derived from customs duties. Hugh listens carefully to the merchants' detailed account of their difficulties, understanding that their specific problem reflects broader issues affecting commercial activity throughout the kingdom during winter months. Reliable transportation requires cooperation between royal administration and local authorities who control roads, bridges, and way station facilities, essential for long-distance trade. Excessive interference or arbitrary taxation disrupts established commercial relationships while reducing the prosperity that benefits all levels of medieval society. The king's response demonstrates his skill in crafting solutions that address immediate problems while establishing principles for future commercial policy. He rules that wine shipments bearing royal trading licenses cannot be detained unreasonably by local authorities, while establishing compensation mechanisms for losses caused by unauthorized delays. The decision protects legitimate commerce while respecting noble rights to regulate activities within their territories according to established customs and privileges. Following the commercial dispute, Hugh addresses a complex marriage negotiation involving noble families whose alliance could strengthen royal authority in regions where Capetian influence remains limited, despite years of patient diplomacy and careful relationship building. The proposed union would join the daughter of a loyal count with the heir of a previously neutral lord whose territories command strategic river crossings that affect both military security and commercial transportation throughout the Loire Valley. Medieval marriage negotiations involve far more than personal compatibility or romantic attachment, as family alliances create political relationships that can endure for generations while affecting territorial boundaries, military obligations, and succession rights that shape the kingdom's future development. Hugh must balance his desire to strengthen royal influence through strategic marriages against the need to respect family autonomy and traditional customs that govern noble relationships and property transfers. The discussions reveal the intricate calculations that underlie medieval diplomacy, as representatives of both families present arguments based on genealogical precedents, territorial considerations, and military capabilities that would result from their proposed alliance. The bride's father emphasizes his family's long loyalty to the crown, while highlighting his daughter's education and accomplishments that make her suitable for marriage into a family of higher social standing. The prospective groom's representatives focus on their lord's strategic importance and his willingness to enter into closer relationships with royal administration in exchange for appropriate recognition and support. Hugh approaches these negotiations with patience and diplomatic skill, understanding that successful marriages require genuine consent from all parties while serving broader political purposes that strengthen the kingdom's unity and security. His eventual support for the proposed union comes with conditions that respect family autonomy, while establishing precedents for royal involvement in noble marriages that affect strategic interests and territorial relationships. The midday break provides opportunities for private consultation with advisors whose expertise spans the various aspects of winter governance that require constant attention despite seasonal limitations on travel and communication. Today's discussions focus on military preparations for spring campaigns that will address territorial disputes and security threats that have accumulated during winter months, when active warfare becomes impractical for most medieval armies. The Royal Marshal presents detailed plans for recruiting and training additional forces to supplement existing garrisons that have proven adequate for defensive purposes, but may require reinforcement for more ambitious military operations. Winter provides opportunities for weapons manufacture and equipment preparation that can proceed despite weather conditions that halt most other activities, allowing royal armories to accumulate supplies needed for spring mobilization. Financial planning for military activities requires careful coordination between immediate needs and long-term fiscal stability, as warfare consumes enormous resources while potentially disrupting the economic activities that generate royal revenues. Hugh's treasurer presents calculations showing available funds for military expenditures, while identifying additional revenue sources that could support expanded operations without imposing excessive burdens on subjects who already struggle with winter's economic challenges. The discussions reveal the complex relationships between military policy and broader governmental objectives, as advisors consider how military actions might affect diplomatic relationships, commercial activities, and internal political stability. Successful campaigns could strengthen royal authority while providing opportunities for territorial expansion, yet unsuccessful ventures might weaken the dynasty's position, while encouraging challenges from domestic rivals or foreign enemies who perceive vulnerability. Hugh's approach to military planning reflects his characteristic preference for systematic preparation over dramatic gestures, as he authorizes gradual force expansion while maintaining flexibility for adjustments based on changing circumstances and emerging opportunities. The strategy emphasizes defensive capabilities while creating options for offensive operations that could address specific threats or advance clearly defined objectives without overcommitting limited resources to uncertain ventures. The afternoon brings audiences with ecclesiastical representatives whose concerns reflect the complex relationships between secular and spiritual authority that characterize medieval governance during seasons when religious observance intensifies, while practical cooperation becomes essential for community survival. The abbot of Saint-Martin at Tours requests royal support for expanded charitable activities that provide food and shelter for pilgrims and poor travelers who face particular hardships during winter months. Medieval charity operates through networks of religious institutions that receive support from both ecclesiastical and secular authorities, while serving populations that include subjects of various lords and jurisdictions. The abbot's request involves not only immediate financial assistance, but also questions about royal authority over religious activities that cross territorial boundaries, while serving subjects whose welfare reflects on the competence and righteousness of their rulers. Hugh responds favourably to the abbot's request, while using the opportunity to strengthen relationships between royal administration and religious institutions that provide essential services throughout the kingdom. His support comes with requirements for regular reporting on charitable activities and coordination with secular authorities who share responsibility for maintaining order and security in areas where large numbers of travellers concentrate during winter months. The afternoon continues with review of judicial cases that have accumulated during winter months, when travel difficulties prevent many disputes from receiving timely attention in royal courts. The backlog includes property disputes, inheritance questions, and commercial conflicts that require resolution before spring activities resume and parties involved can implement whatever decisions royal justice produces. A particularly complex case involves competing claims to mill rights along a tributary of the Marne, where the original grant documents have been lost or destroyed, while the parties present conflicting testimony about the terms and conditions governing their respective privileges. Medieval property law relies heavily on written documentation and witness testimony, yet both forms of evidence can become unreliable over time as documents disappear and witnesses die or develop conflicting memories of past events. Hugh approaches the case with methodical attention to legal principles and practical considerations that extend beyond the immediate parties to affect broader questions about property rights and royal authority. His decision must balance justice for the individuals involved against the need to establish precedents that strengthen legal consistency and royal oversight of property disputes throughout the kingdom. The king's eventual ruling demonstrates his skill in finding solutions that serve multiple purposes while maintaining essential relationships with various constituencies. He divides the mill rights between competing claimants while requiring both parties to acknowledge royal authority over future disputes and pay licensing fees that establish Crown involvement in commercial activities that affect local economies and transportation networks. Evening approaches as winter darkness falls early over the castle, transforming the great hall into an intimate gathering place, illuminated by torches and braziers that create pools of warmth and light in the vast stone chamber. Hugh's household prepares for the evening feast that serves important social and political functions, despite seasonal limitations on travel that reduce the number of visitors who can attend these gatherings. Tonight's assembly includes permanent residents and hardy guests who have braved winter conditions to maintain relationships with the royal court during months when most diplomatic and commercial activities cease entirely. The conversations blend practical concerns about surviving winter's remaining months, with planning for spring activities that will resume as weather conditions improve and transportation becomes reliable again. Hugh moves among his guests with practiced ease, understanding that these winter gatherings provide unique opportunities for relationship building in intimate settings, where formal protocol gives way to genuine conversation and shared experience of seasonal challenges that affect all levels of medieval society. He pauses to discuss theological questions with visiting monks whose learning enriches court intellectual life, while their practical experience managing monastic communities provides insights into administrative techniques and community organization. A group of craftsmen presents examples of weapons and tools produced during winter months when other work becomes impossible, their techniques reflecting innovations learned through contact with foreign artisans and adaptation to local materials and conditions. Hugh examines their work with genuine interest, understanding that technical improvements in metalworking and construction affect both military capabilities and economic productivity throughout the kingdom. Following the evening feast, Hugh retires to his private study, where winter provides extended hours for correspondence and administrative work, that proceeds despite seasonal limitations on travel and communication. The chamber has been made comfortable with multiple braziers and thick wall hangings that create a warm environment for intellectual work, while oil lamps provide steady light for detailed reading and writing tasks. Tonight's correspondence includes letters from throughout Europe that reveal continuing developments in international relationships, despite winter's constraints on diplomatic travel and face-to-face negotiations. The Papal Court reports successful resolution of disputes involving ecclesiastical jurisdiction, while expressing interest in closer cooperation with French authorities on matters affecting church-state relationships throughout Christendom. Hugh's response demonstrates his understanding of the delicate balance required in relationships with religious authorities, who possess independent sources of legitimacy while depending on secular support for many practical activities. He expresses commitment to traditional cooperation while asserting royal prerogatives in matters affecting temporal governance and territorial administration within his kingdom. A letter from German territories describes continuing conflicts between imperial authorities and regional nobles, whose resistance creates opportunities for French influence in borderland areas where jurisdictional questions remain unsettled despite years of diplomatic negotiation and occasional military intervention. The correspondence suggests possibilities for French support of anti-imperial factions in exchange for territorial concessions and commercial privileges that could strengthen the kingdom's eastern position. The king approaches such proposals with characteristic caution, understanding that involvement in foreign conflicts could provide benefits while creating obligations and enemies that might prove costly in future circumstances. His response maintains friendly relationships while avoiding specific commitments that could limit future flexibility or create unwanted precedents for intervention in neighbouring territories. As midnight approaches, Hugh makes his customary inspection of castle defences, despite winter conditions that create both challenges and advantages for potential enemies, who might exploit seasonal vulnerabilities while facing their own transportation and supply difficulties. The guards who maintain watch through winter nights receive additional provisions and equipment to sustain their vigilance during months when external threats may seem less immediate but require constant attention nonetheless. In the castle chapel, Hugh offers final prayers before retiring, kneeling before the golden cross while votive candles provide flickering light that seems to push back against winter's oppressive darkness. The quiet moments of prayer provide spiritual renewal while reinforcing the religious foundations that legitimize royal authority as divine sanction expressed through earthly governance, even during seasons when human activities seem constrained by natural forces beyond mortal control. Returning to his chamber, Hugh finds his bed warmed with heated stones and prepared with additional woolen blankets that provide comfort against winter's penetrating cold. The simple luxuries represent appropriate royal dignity, while acknowledging practical realities that affect all subjects who must endure seasonal hardships that test both physical endurance and spiritual faith during months when survival requires careful planning and mutual cooperation. As he settles beneath warm coverlets, Hugh's mind reviews the day's accomplishments and challenges, while considering their implications for the kingdom's development and the dynasty's continuing consolidation of authority. Winter governance requires different approaches than other seasons, as limited mobility and communication create both constraints and opportunities that shape royal policy and administrative effectiveness. The judicial and administrative business conducted during winter months demonstrates the kingdom's growing institutional sophistication as royal government maintains essential functions, despite seasonal limitations that previously brought most governmental activities to virtual standstill. The ability to continue effective administration throughout the year strengthens royal authority while providing subjects with consistent access to justice and governmental services, regardless of weather conditions or transportation difficulties. Commercial and diplomatic activities adapted to winter conditions reveal the expanding scope of French international relationships, as Hugh's reputation attracts foreign partners who maintain contact, despite seasonal challenges that test commitment and mutual interest. These relationships strengthen the kingdom economically, while providing intelligence and influence that enhance French security and international standing during periods when direct military action becomes impractical. Military preparations conducted during winter months create capabilities that can address spring challenges while demonstrating royal commitment to defense and security that reassures subjects and potential allies while deterring enemies who might otherwise exploit seasonal transitions for aggressive actions. The systematic approach to force development and strategic planning reflects institutional maturity that distinguishes Capetian administration from previous rulers, who relied primarily on personal charisma and seasonal improvisation. The transformation of winter from a period of governmental dormancy into a season of continued activity and preparation represents institutional development that creates foundations for dynastic continuity across changing circumstances and leadership transitions. Future Capetian kings will inherit administrative systems capable of year-round operation, while possessing flexibility for adaptation to evolving challenges and opportunities. Hugh understands that his greatest contribution to dynastic survival lies not in personal accomplishments or temporary successes, but in creating institutional frameworks that enable effective governance, regardless of individual capabilities or specific circumstances. The systems established during these crucial years provide future rulers with tools and precedents for addressing challenges while maintaining continuity that strengthens royal authority across generations. In the darkness of his chamber, Hugh Capet contemplates the remarkable progress achieved during 4 years of patient institution building that has transformed a precarious royal position into the foundation for enduring dynastic authority. The kingdom has achieved stability and prosperity that seemed impossible during those uncertain first months when royal authority extended little beyond the immediate vicinity of Paris, and personal survival required constant vigilance against potential challenges. The challenges ahead remain formidable as external pressures and internal tensions continue testing the kingdom's unity and the dynasty's resilience. Yet, the foundations established during these formative years provide capabilities for addressing evolving threats while maintaining the stability and prosperity that benefit all subjects of the growing French realm under Capetian rule. Winter's constraints and opportunities have become integrated into governmental routines that demonstrate institutional maturity while creating precedents for future administrative development and diplomatic relationships. The spring of 992 awakens the royal domains with a gentle murmur of returning life, as Hugh Capet prepares to face his 5th year as king with the quiet confidence of a ruler who has weathered the storms of early reign and emerged with authority firmly established. The cherry trees in the castle courtyard burst forth in clouds of white blossoms that drift like snow through the warming air, while the Seine runs swift and clear beneath his chamber window, carrying the melted tribute of distant mountains toward the sea. Hugh rises with the earliest light, his body attuned to rhythms that have become as natural as breathing after years of dawn councils and midnight deliberations. The bronze basin holds water warmed by spring sunshine rather than kitchen fires, and his morning ablutions reflect the season's promise of renewed activity and expanded possibilities. Today he chooses a tunic of pale green silk, its colour echoing the young leaves unfurling throughout his domains, while a belt of tooled leather bears the golden buckle that has become his personal emblem among the craftsmen who serve the royal household. The great hall stirs with the energy of servants preparing for increased activity as spring brings resumed travel, renewed trade, and the return of visitors whose winter absence has left the court feeling smaller and more intimate than the bustling centre of governance it becomes during warmer months. Hugh breaks his fast at a table laden with fresh bread, early spring vegetables from the castle gardens, and preserved meats that have sustained the household through winter's lean months while promising abundance in the seasons ahead. His advisors gather with faces marked by the anticipation that spring always brings to medieval administration, as the lifting of winter's constraints opens possibilities for initiatives that have been planned and refined during months of forced inactivity. The conversation flows with the easy familiarity of men who have worked together through multiple seasons of challenge and success, their voices blending with the sounds of castle awakening, to another day of governance that will shape the kingdom's continuing development. Reports arrive with unprecedented speed as improved roads and favourable weather restore communication networks that bind the realm together through bonds of information and administrative oversight. Today's dispatches carry news of successful planting throughout the royal domains, where favourable conditions promise harvests that will strengthen both local prosperity and royal revenues through taxation and customary obligations. The systematic agricultural improvements implemented during previous years show their effectiveness as farmers employ techniques learned through royal agricultural advisors who spread knowledge gained from monastic experimentation and foreign observation. From the eastern frontiers comes word that the defensive network established during Hugh's early reign has evolved into permanent settlements where soldiers' families create communities that serve both military and economic purposes. The fortified positions provide security, while their markets attract merchants and craftsmen, whose activities generate prosperity that benefits both local populations and royal revenues through taxation and regulation of commercial activities that flourish under protected conditions. The Norman territories report continuing calm along coastal regions where diplomatic agreements with Scandinavian leaders have transformed former enemies into trading partners whose commerce enriches both kingdoms while reducing the military expenditures previously required for constant defensive vigilance. The transformation demonstrates the effectiveness of patient diplomacy that addresses underlying causes of conflict rather than merely responding to immediate symptoms with military force that consumes resources without resolving fundamental problems. Following the morning meal, Hugh makes his way through corridors brightened by spring light, streaming through windows that no longer require the heavy shutters needed during winter's harsh months. The castle chapel welcomes him with warmth and the fragrance of fresh flowers placed before the altar by servants whose devotion reflects both personal piety and understanding. That royal spiritual welfare affects the entire kingdom's relationship with divine authority that legitimizes earthly governance. The king kneels before an altar now adorned with silk vestments donated by grateful subjects, whose prosperity has increased under Capetian rule, their gifts reflecting both thanksgiving for past blessings and confidence in continued royal effectiveness. Morning prayers include specific petitions for favourable weather during the crucial planting season, as Hugh understands that agricultural success directly affects every aspect of medieval life, from individual survival to royal revenues that support governmental activities throughout the kingdom. After prayers, the royal court convenes in the Great Hall, where spring light illuminates the marble throne that has become the symbolic centre of Capetian authority, while serving as a practical platform for conducting the detailed business of medieval governance. The morning session begins with review of reports from provincial administrators whose winter planning now transforms into active implementation of projects that will strengthen both local prosperity and royal authority throughout the realm. The governor of Burgundy presents detailed plans for expanding vineyard cultivation in areas where soil conditions and climate favour wine production that could compete with imports while generating export revenues that benefit the entire kingdom's economic development. The proposals involve not only agricultural techniques, but also commercial arrangements with foreign merchants whose expertise in wine marketing could establish French vintages in international markets that currently purchase exclusively from Italian and German producers. Hugh examines the proposal with careful attention to both immediate benefits and longer-term implications for agricultural policy and commercial development throughout the kingdom. Wine production requires substantial initial investments in land preparation and equipment, while generating profits only after several years of patient cultivation and careful processing. The royal commitment to such projects demonstrates confidence in dynastic continuity, while creating economic foundations that will benefit future generations of both producers and consumers. The king's response reveals his understanding of the complex relationships between agricultural innovation and broader economic development, as he approves experimental vineyard projects while requiring regular reporting on progress and results. The systematic approach ensures that royal resources support ventures with genuine prospects for success, while creating knowledge that can guide future agricultural policies and commercial initiatives throughout the kingdom. Following the agricultural discussion, Hugh addresses a delegation of merchants from Flanders, whose proposals for expanded textile trade could transform French commercial relationships while creating new sources of royal revenue through customs duties and commercial regulation. The Flemish representatives describe sophisticated manufacturing techniques that could be adapted to French conditions, while their knowledge of international markets provides insights into commercial opportunities that French producers have yet to exploit. The merchants' presence in the royal court reflects Hugh's reputation for fair dealing and competent governance that attracts foreign partners seeking reliable relationships with authorities who honor agreements while protecting legitimate commercial activities from arbitrary interference or excessive taxation. Their proposals involve not only immediate trading arrangements, but also technology transfer that could establish French textile production as a significant economic sector, capable of competing with established foreign producers. Hugh listens carefully to their detailed presentations while considering implications for existing domestic industries and traditional economic relationships that might be disrupted by innovative manufacturing techniques or new commercial arrangements. Medieval economics operate through complex networks of mutual obligation and established practice that can be destabilized by rapid change. Yet the kingdom's prosperity depends on adaptability to evolving opportunities and technological developments that determine competitive advantages in international markets. The morning continues with judicial cases that reveal the growing sophistication of royal legal administration as subjects throughout the kingdom increasingly seek royal justice, rather than relying exclusively on local nobles or ecclesiastical authorities for dispute resolution. Today's docket includes a complex inheritance case involving merchant properties in multiple jurisdictions, where different legal traditions create conflicting claims that require royal arbitration based on principles that transcend local customs while respecting established rights and privileges. The case involves three brothers, whose father built a trading network spanning several major cities before his death, created succession disputes that threatened to destroy commercial relationships developed over decades of careful cultivation. Each brother claims different portions of the enterprise based on various legal traditions and documentary evidence that reflects the complex evolution of medieval commercial law, where Roman principles blend with Germanic customs and local innovations to create frameworks that sometimes generate more problems than they solve. Hugh approaches the case with methodical precision that reflects both legal training and practical understanding of commercial relationships that require stability and predictability to function effectively in an era when communication difficulties and transportation hazards already create substantial risks for long-distance trading ventures. His decision must balance individual justice with broader implications for commercial law and royal authority over economic activities that cross territorial boundaries and jurisdictional divisions. The king's eventual ruling demonstrates his skill in crafting solutions that address immediate problems while establishing precedents for future commercial disputes and royal involvement in economic activities that affect multiple jurisdictions. He divides the commercial properties according to principles that recognize each brother's contributions, while requiring cooperation in maintaining trading relationships that benefit all parties and generate revenues for royal administration through taxation and commercial regulation. The midday break provides opportunities for private consultation with advisors whose expertise spans the various aspects of spring governance that require coordination between immediate activities and longer-term planning for summer campaigns, autumn preparations, and winter survival that demonstrate governmental competence and foresight. Today's discussions focus on military preparations for potential conflicts that may arise as improved weather conditions enable more aggressive actions by enemies who have spent winter months planning campaigns against French interests. Intelligence reports describe increased activity in German territories where imperial forces prepare for possible intervention in French affairs if opportunities arise to exploit internal divisions or external vulnerabilities that might justify aggressive actions under various legal pretexts. The threat requires careful balance between defensive preparations that demonstrate strength and resolve while avoiding provocative actions that could trigger conflicts before French forces achieve optimal readiness for sustained military operations. Hugh's approach to these security challenges reflects his characteristic preference for systematic preparation over dramatic gestures, as he authorizes gradual military build-up while maintaining diplomatic communications that seek to resolve potential conflicts through negotiation, rather than warfare that consumes enormous resources while creating uncertainties that affect all aspects of governmental planning and economic development throughout the kingdom. The discussions also address domestic security concerns, as spring's arrival enables increased travel that includes both legitimate visitors and potential enemies who might exploit seasonal transitions to infiltrate French territories for intelligence gathering or sabotage activities. The Royal Intelligence Network has expanded significantly since Hugh's accession, creating capabilities for monitoring suspicious activities while protecting the legitimate movement of merchants, pilgrims, and diplomatic representatives whose presence enriches the kingdom's economic and cultural development. The afternoon brings audiences with ecclesiastical representatives whose spring activities require coordination with secular authorities to ensure effective cooperation in charitable works, educational initiatives, and diplomatic relationships that affect both religious and temporal interests throughout Christendom. The Abbot of Saint-Denis requests royal support for expanded manuscript copying projects that would preserve classical learning while creating educational resources that strengthen both religious instruction and secular administration throughout the kingdom. Medieval learning depends heavily on monastic scriptoriums where trained scribes preserve ancient wisdom while creating new works that address contemporary challenges and opportunities. The abbot's proposal involves not only immediate support for copying activities, but also establishment of systematic programs for training scribes whose skills serve both religious and secular purposes, in an era when literacy remains limited to relatively small numbers of educated individuals, whose knowledge enables effective governance and cultural development. Hugh responds favourably to the abbot's request, while using the opportunity to strengthen relationships between royal administration and religious institutions whose activities support governmental objectives while serving spiritual needs that affect popular morale and social stability. His support includes financial assistance for materials and equipment, while establishing requirements for producing specific types of documents that serve royal administrative needs and legal proceedings throughout the kingdom. The afternoon session continues with review of construction projects that resumed with spring's arrival after winter delays that tested the patience of both supervisors and workers, whose dedication to royal service enables completion of infrastructure improvements that benefit all levels of medieval society. Road construction and bridge building facilitate communication and commerce, while providing employment for craftsmen and labourers, whose wages support local economies and generate tax revenues that fund additional governmental activities. A particularly ambitious project involves construction of a stone bridge across the Loire at Tours, where the existing wooden structure proves inadequate for increased commercial traffic, while requiring constant maintenance that consumes resources without providing lasting solutions to transportation challenges. The proposed stone bridge would serve for generations while creating economic opportunities for local populations whose prosperity strengthens royal authority and territorial security in a strategically important region. Hugh examines detailed plans and cost estimates prepared by master builders whose expertise has been proven through previous projects that demonstrate both technical competence and financial responsibility in managing royal resources. The bridge project requires substantial initial investment while promising long-term benefits that justify expenditure of resources that could serve other purposes with more immediate returns but less lasting impact on the kingdom's development and prosperity. The king's approval of the bridge project reflects his understanding of infrastructure development as fundamental to economic growth and territorial integration that strengthens royal authority while benefiting all subjects whose activities depend on reliable transportation networks. The systematic approach to public works creates employment, while building capabilities that enable expanded governmental activities, and commercial development throughout the kingdom. Evening approaches as spring light lingers longer than winter's early darkness, allowing extended sessions of governmental business while creating opportunities for social activities that serve important diplomatic and relationship-building functions in the informal atmosphere that characterizes court life during pleasant weather. The great hall fills with the sounds of preparation for the evening feast that brings together permanent residents and seasonal visitors, whose presence enriches court intellectual life while serving practical political purposes. Tonight's gathering includes delegates from various parts of the kingdom whose reports on local conditions provide Hugh with detailed knowledge of regional developments, while their presence at court demonstrates royal accessibility and concern for subjects throughout the realm, regardless of their distance from the centres of governmental power. The conversations blend practical administrative matters with cultural discussions that reflect the kingdom's growing reputation as a centre of learning and sophisticated governance. Hugh moves among his guests with practiced ease, understanding that these informal interactions often accomplish more than formal negotiations in building relationships that support effective governance and territorial unity. He pauses to discuss agricultural techniques with visiting nobles whose experimental approaches to land management could benefit other regions if their innovations prove successful under different conditions and circumstances. A group of scholars from cathedral schools throughout France describes educational developments that strengthen both religious instruction and secular learning, their knowledge contributing to royal understanding of intellectual currents that shape contemporary European culture, while their presence demonstrates the kingdom's commitment to supporting educational activities that benefit both church and state. Their discussions reveal ongoing debates about theological questions and philosophical issues that affect political theory and governmental practice throughout Christendom. Foreign visitors provide information about developments beyond French borders that affect international relationships and commercial opportunities, while their presence demonstrates the kingdom's growing reputation for hospitality and fair dealing that attracts merchants, diplomats, and scholars who contribute to economic prosperity and cultural enrichment. Tonight's gathering includes representatives from Italian cities whose commercial expertise could benefit French trade, while their political experiences provide insights into governmental techniques and diplomatic strategies. Following the evening feast, Hugh retires to his private study, where spring's extended daylight allows longer sessions of correspondence and administrative work that maintains the communication networks binding the kingdom together while advancing diplomatic relationships that serve French interests in an increasingly complex European political environment. The chamber has been refreshed for spring with new hangings and additional oil lamps that provide optimal conditions for detailed reading and careful writing. Tonight's correspondence includes letters from throughout Europe that reveal continuing developments in international relationships as rulers emerge from winter isolation to resume diplomatic communications and commercial negotiations that shape the balance of power and economic prosperity throughout Christendom. The papal court describes successful mediation of disputes between various kingdoms, while expressing appreciation for French cooperation in maintaining peace and supporting church interests in territorial conflicts and jurisdictional questions. Hugh's response demonstrates his skill in diplomatic correspondence that advances French interests while maintaining cordial relationships with religious authorities whose support strengthens royal legitimacy and territorial security. He expresses continued commitment to cooperation with papal policies while asserting royal prerogatives in matters affecting temporal governance and commercial activities within his kingdom's established boundaries and traditional spheres of influence. A letter from English territories describes King Ethelred's continuing struggles with Danish invasions that create opportunities for French diplomatic initiatives, while requiring careful balance between potential benefits and risks of involvement in conflicts that could drain resources without achieving lasting solutions to security challenges that affect all maritime kingdoms. The correspondence suggests possibilities for coordinated defensive measures that could benefit both realms while establishing precedents for future cooperation. The king approaches such proposals with characteristic caution, understanding that international commitments require careful evaluation of both immediate benefits and longer-term implications for royal resources and territorial security. His response maintains friendly relationships while avoiding specific obligations that might limit future flexibility or create unwanted precedents for intervention in foreign conflicts that could develop in unexpected directions. As the evening deepens, Hugh makes his customary inspection of castle defences, despite spring conditions that create both opportunities and challenges for potential enemies whose movements become easier with improved weather, while surveillance becomes more difficult as increased legitimate travel provides cover for suspicious activities. The guards who maintain watch through spring nights receive updated instructions about seasonal security concerns, while continuing their vigilant protection of royal persons and properties. In the castle chapel, Hugh offers final prayers before retiring, kneeling before the golden cross, while votive candles provide steady light that seems to celebrate spring's triumph over winter darkness. The quiet moments provide spiritual renewal, while reinforcing religious foundations that legitimize royal authority as divine sanction, expressed through earthly governance during seasons of renewal and growth that demonstrate God's continuing providence and blessing. Returning to his chamber, Hugh finds his bed prepared with lighter coverlets, appropriate for spring's warmer nights, while windows remain open to admit fresh air that carries the fragrance of blooming gardens and the sound of water flowing freely in the Seine below. The seasonal transition provides both physical comfort and symbolic renewal, as winter's constraints give way to spring's possibilities and summer's anticipated abundance. As he settles beneath comfortable bedding, Hugh's mind reviews the day's accomplishments and challenges while considering their implications for the kingdom's continuing development and the dynasty's expanding authority throughout territories that increasingly recognize Capetian legitimacy and effectiveness. Spring governance requires adaptation to changing conditions while maintaining institutional continuity that provides stability and predictability for subjects whose prosperity depends on reliable governmental services and consistent legal frameworks. The judicial and administrative business conducted during spring months demonstrates the kingdom's institutional sophistication as royal government adapts to seasonal opportunities while maintaining essential functions that serve subjects throughout the year, regardless of weather conditions or transportation difficulties. The ability to expand activities during favourable seasons while maintaining core services during challenging periods reflects administrative maturity that distinguishes Capetian governance from previous approaches that relied heavily on personal improvisation and seasonal adaptation. Commercial and diplomatic developments reveal the expanding scope of French international relationships as Hugh's reputation attracts foreign partners who seek long-term arrangements with authorities known for reliability and fair dealing. These relationships strengthen the kingdom economically while providing intelligence and influence that enhance French security and international standing during periods of renewed activity and expanded possibilities that characterize spring's return to European political and commercial life. Military preparations adapted to spring conditions create capabilities that can address emerging challenges, while demonstrating royal commitment to defense and security that reassures subjects and allies while deterring enemies who might otherwise exploit seasonal transitions for aggressive actions. The systematic approach to force development reflects institutional planning that transcends individual leadership while maintaining flexibility for adaptation to evolving circumstances and opportunities. The transformation of seasonal governance from reactive adjustment to proactive planning represents institutional development that creates foundations for dynastic continuity across changing leadership and varying circumstances. Future Capetian kings will inherit administrative systems capable of year-round effectiveness, while possessing capabilities for seasonal expansion and adaptation that enable optimal use of natural cycles and climatic opportunities that affect all aspects of medieval life and governmental activity. Hugh understands that his legacy lies not in personal achievements, or temporary successes, but in creating institutional frameworks that enable effective governance regardless of individual capabilities or specific circumstances that may challenge future rulers. The systems established during these formative years provide tools and precedents for addressing challenges while maintaining continuity that strengthens royal authority across generations and changing conditions that test dynastic resilience and adaptability. In the darkness of his chamber, Hugh Capet contemplates the remarkable transformation achieved during 5 years of patient institution building that has created from uncertain beginnings a foundation for enduring royal authority that serves both immediate needs and long-term dynastic survival. The kingdom has achieved levels of stability and prosperity that seemed impossible during those early months when royal survival required constant vigilance, while governmental effectiveness remained largely theoretical rather than practical reality. The challenges ahead continue to test the kingdom's unity and the dynasty's resilience as external pressures and internal tensions evolve with changing circumstances and emerging opportunities. Yet the foundations established during these crucial years provide capabilities for addressing threats while maintaining prosperity that benefits all subjects of the growing French realm under increasingly secure and effective Capetian rule. Spring's renewal becomes both symbol and reality of dynastic vitality that promises continued development and expanding authority throughout territories that increasingly acknowledge the legitimacy and effectiveness of royal governance under Hugh's patient but determined leadership. The summer of 993 brings a different quality of light to the royal chambers as Hugh Capet enters his 6th year of rule. The warm breeze carrying the scent of ripening grain from fields that stretch beyond the castle walls like a golden tapestry woven by countless peasant hands. The king wakes to the sound of church bells calling the faithful to morning prayers, their bronze voices echoing across the Seine as merchants already begin their daily commerce along the bustling riverbank below. His morning ritual has evolved into something approaching ceremony, though Hugh maintains the practical simplicity that has become his hallmark among subjects who respect substance over ostentation. The water in his bronze basin reflects summer sunlight streaming through windows that no longer require shutters against winter's bite, while his clothing speaks to both seasonal comfort and royal dignity. A tunic of cream-coloured linen, its surface decorated with subtle embroidery worked in threads of gold, covers a frame that has grown more substantial during years of royal responsibility and regular meals that never face the uncertainty common among his subjects. The great hall stirs with the efficient movement of servants whose routines have been perfected through seasons of service, their activities creating the foundation upon which royal governance rests each day. Hugh breaks his fast at a table where fresh bread mingles with early summer fruits, the abundance reflecting both favourable weather and the agricultural policies that have encouraged improved cultivation throughout his domains. His advisors gather with the quiet confidence of men who have weathered crises together, their conversations blending immediate concerns with longer-term planning that extends the reach of royal authority into every corner of the expanding realm. And so, my friend, as the summer evening settles over the Seine and Hugh Capet prepares for another night of restful sleep, we reach the end of our gentle journey through the founding days of medieval France. From that uncertain morning in 987, when a reluctant noble accepted a crown, to these confident years when royal authority flows like the river itself through every corner of the realm, we have witnessed the patient work of dynasty building. Hugh understood what many rulers never grasp, that true power lies not in dramatic conquest, but in the daily choices that shape institutions, build trust, and create lasting foundations. The Capetian kings who follow will inherit not just a throne, but a system of governance that will endure for centuries, guiding France from medieval kingdom to modern nation. Sleep well, knowing that sometimes the greatest revolutions happen not with the clash of swords, but with the quiet wisdom of those who plant trees whose shade they will never see.